This is Act 1, Scene 3, and it's line 28 onwards, and it's an interesting look at Hotspur's character. In this scene at the beginning, the king is upset, I suppose, as to why Hotspur hasn't released the prisoners that they've taken to the king, which was customary. And Hotspur says to the king, "My liege, I did deny no prisoners, but I remember when the fight was done, when I was dry with rage and extreme turmoil, breathless and faint, leaning upon my sword came there a certain lord, neat and trimly dressed, fresh as a bridegroom, and his chin new reaped showed like a stubble land at harvest time. He was a perfumed like a milliner, and twixt his finger and thumb he held a pouncet box, which ever and anon gave his nose and took it away again." So he's saying, after the battle, and I was very tired, breathless, faint, and right at the end of the battle, I hadn't had time to do anything, and then a certain lord came along, and he was dressed fresh as a bridegroom. So he was all sweetly presented and newly shaved and smelt lovely, and he on the battlefield he was holding this pouncet box, a little box of snuff that whenever a foul smell came along, he would sniff that in rather than have to smell the battle of the blood and the mud and all that the smells of war. And then he said, he gave his nose and took it away again, who therewith angry, when it came next there, took it in snuff, and still smiled and talked as the soldiers bore dead bodies by. He called them untaught knaves, unmannerly, to bring slovenly, unhandsome corpse betwixt the wind and his nobility. And so Hotspur is really offended by this noble for disrespecting the art of war. Then he says, "With many holiday and lady terms he questioned me." So, he was very, not inappropriate, but the questions were inappropriate for the situation. He'd just been in the twixt of battle, and now this very effeminate noble is asking him questions that, it's the wrong time. That should come after. So he'd question me amongst the rest, demanded my prisoners in your majesty's behalf. And this is where he's getting to, that, Hotspur's offended by the timing of this noble, and, demanding the prisoners at this time was inappropriate, he felt. I then, all smarting with my wounds being cold, so to be pestered with a popinjay out of my grief and impatience, answered neglectingly, I know not what he should or should not, for he made me mad. So he's saying here that, I was still, my wounds were getting cold, I'm on the battlefield, and I was annoyed to be pestered by a popinjay, by a bird, like a bird pouncing around. And so out of my grief and my impatience, I answered him neglectingly, and I can't remember what I said, but he should or he should not, for he made me mad. That's why he did it. To see him shine so brisk and smell so sweet, and talk so like a waiting gentleman of guns and drums and wounds, God save the mark. So it's high offence is really what he's saying. And telling me that the sovereign's thing on earth was a parmaceti for an inward bruise, so some whale oil, a medication, that was the most wonderful thing on earth. And it was a great pity, so it was, that this villainous saltpetre should be digged out of the bowels of the harmless earth, which many a good tall fellow had destroyed so cowardly. And but for these vile guns he would himself have been a soldier. This bald, unjointed chat of his, my lord, I answered indirectly, as I said, and I beseech you, let not his report come current for an accusation betwixt my love for your high majesty. So he's saying here that that the noble was not at all appropriate at the time, and it angered him, and he was the total antithesis of war and battles and soldiers, and that offended him. So he says that of this bald, unjointed chat of his, so he's basically saying he's an empty-headed fool. I answered him directly, and as I said, I beseech you, don't let his report back to you stand as an accusation that I don't respect and love you as my king. So we get a good impression of Hotspur here, that he is a man of action and he is a man of good morals, and that duty and honour and nobility are very important to him.